Hello, everyone. This is SIG-cluster-lifecycle on the 5th of September 2017. And we have just passed the code freeze. So it'd be interesting to find out where we got to with everything. But before we do that, let's start with going through the agenda. So Jessica Chen, who is trying to get online. Jessica, are you here? Nope. Maybe we could put that to the bottom of the agenda so that if she does manage to get online. Oh, did that? Yeah, I'll copy the whole thing. So let's start with Lucas's several points here. Hey, Lucas, how you doing?
Hi, thanks. I'm doing fine. Yeah, if you could run a super short recap of what you did last week, like decided.
Yeah, sure. For your sake and for anyone else who wasn't here last week, basically, the bad news is that we were not able to get everything in that we needed for sort of for self-hosting, really. And I think I forget the exact details, but we were blocked on, I think it was SIG apps asking us to provide a design doc for something that was verbally agreed at the last minute, and then blocking on review prior to the code freeze to get the
I think it's because the checkpointer wasn't going to make it, right?
Yeah.
Then we decided not to push on the daemon set one, which needed that design doc to go through because it wasn't worth expending our capital if the checkpointing wasn't going to make it.
Yes, that's
so
right.
There was a general self-hosting push off to not make it default for 1.8, just because there was several other things in flight, and we had that long conversation about it. And the PRs and docs are in place for the checkpointing, but I don't think we would have review bandwidth to get that done and in place. Besides, there's contentiousness on naming of things too. So I didn't realize. I thought the daemon set feature though was completely orthogonal to this.
The daemon set feature, I think, is orthogonal to this. So this is the pull request 50984, I think, was the checkpointing proposal or the checkpointing implementation. I think it was when we realized that the checkpointing implementation was the thing that wasn't going to land. We realized that self-hosting wasn't really going to be viable in 1.8, and therefore that the upgrade, the daemon set surge rolling update strategy, despite being orthogonal, it wasn't as important that we got that in because there was something else that was blocking us rolling that feature out anyway.
The daemon set feature, though, I thought that was more important for upgrades than it was necessarily for self-hosting.
Yeah, kind of. But
do we need it to be able to do upgrades at all? Not with static pods, right?
Well, self-hosted upgrades. So
yeah.
Once we have self-hosting, it's required, but it's not required for self-hosting per se.
Yes, it's required for self-hosted upgrades. And given that we're not going to have viable self-hosting anyway, it means that it was less critical.
So what I think we should do here is deploy the out of tree bootkube style checkpointer in 1.8. Call it alpha, which it indeed is. But then we have pretty much a fully working self-hosting environment. I mean, I implemented self-hosting upgrades as well. The daemon set thing is just making those 200 lines of code a little bit easier to implement. But I've done the thing like the hacky way, as we described it, by like basically re-implementing what the daemon set upgrade strategy would do. Not exactly, but similarly. So I think we should just do the checkpointing like out of tree and say that, hey, self-hosting is something you can use. It's in alpha like quality due to that we don't have the checkpointing in the kubelet, but otherwise it should work on a beta level, right?
Do we want to do that? I mean, like it's all about upgrades, right? That's pretty much what most people will care. What's the primary motivation for self-hosting, from my understanding, was upgrades, right? So if we have upgrade support in the native version with static pods, do we want to put out this option in the wild and potentially have people use it and then have to migrate away from it?
The checkpointing thing, or
yeah, plus also your daemon set strategy. So like you'd have two pieces that you'd have to back out in 1.9 as we get these things in 1.9.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Like,
so you want to you basically stated that you want to have alpha grade support for self-hosting using the external checkpointer along with your modification for self-hosted upgrades, which has the daemon set strategy, right, built into the kubeadm upgrade code.
Yeah.
But if we do this, then we have to have plenty of clauses in place to tell people that this is going to change, right, as we get both the strategy and checkpointing in place for 1.9.
Yeah, but we still, like, if we use well, I definitely think we shouldn't punt on self-hosting like completely, because it's one of the most important features to have in 1.8 to actually to catch these bugs. If we like, the primary motivation for punting on self-hosting by default, when we still thought we should like have full feature support for it, was that we don't want to get too crazy and enable something we haven't tested. But I definitely think we need the 3 months of testing self-hosting out in the wild, and it does work in the in all the cases it needs to, but the implementation is going to be improved over time. But I don't see, like, from an implementation perspective, that a lot of things would be more complicated than they already are.
So long as we write down the tech debt, because we're basically amassing tech debt with this. I'm cool with it. We just need to like write down the docs and tech debt it, right? Because we're gonna have to rip it out.
My question is this something we can even do now that we're post code freeze for 1.8?
You could. I don't think there's any preventing.
Yeah, I mean, just enabling the manifest on an alpha thing like self-hosting support isn't. I mean, I don't see any problem with that. The upgrades, PR, and everything was in time and all that. So I mean, that's code we already got in master since some time ago.
Yeah, I guess what I was well, anyway, I'll finish sort of summarizing where we got to last week, if I recall correctly, and please fill me in if people realize that I've missed things. For me, the sort of the main conclusion was we're still going to have the new upgrade UX, which we'll get to test and have feedback on. It will only be for upgrading static pod clusters. The thing I think we need to be careful about is messaging the fact that we haven't given up on self-hosting, because if you just look at deliverable than you might deduce that SIG cluster lifecycle had. So we need to be very clear about that in what we in how we publicize this. But yeah, I mean, the main thing that we do have is the new upgrade UX. I don't know. I think that putting a different, actually, maybe Lucas, could you talk a little bit more about what you envisage actually happening for this Bootcube style self-hosting? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, so basically it would be like we have Jamie that kindly added feature flag support to KubeADM. So I think it would be great if we had like self-hosting and self-hosting in with secrets, with certificates in secrets, all are already like behind the feature flag or feature gate. And I think it would be great if we, when the alpha key self-hosting is enabled, KubeADM will go ahead, create the self-hosted cluster. You can also do this with KubeADM alpha phase self-hosting. That command, it's the same thing. And then you'd have your self-hosted cluster. You're using an alpha feature, so it's not like we don't have to provide a lot of guarantees, but I think it's really crucial that at least we deploy the checkpointer. That we have this feature, like we already do, but B, we provide a little more stability and more guarantees and make sure your cluster doesn't burn to the ground. But
is it possible for us to have a compromise here? Because we already got the feature freeze in place, but that doesn't prevent us necessarily from most of the code is there, right? I don't know if we could actually backport strategy and checkpointing, though. I guess a part of me was wondering whether or not we could backport some of these features onto 1.8, so that way we could just release as is and then have like a 1.8.1, a fast follow 1.8.1 with some of these other things in place. But I don't think other folks would buy into that.
Yeah, we really try to only backport bug fixes and not features.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean. Like in what sense backporting?
Cherry pick onto 1.8.1 branch both the strategy as well as the checkpoint.
I don't see any reason to do the strategy, but yeah. Anyway, so I think the best we can do now is just like add the Bootcube manifest. Say to all the folks that, hey, please go out and test self-hosting. It's in alpha, it's going to be beta and on by default in 1.9.
So Tim's worry, I think, was that you then end up having to figure out the rollback or upgrade path from those environments that get rolled out, which is complexity, isn't it?
No, not that much. I mean, if we can rely on like checkpointing being in the kubelet in 1.9, which I hope we can, then it's just a matter of there are things like after you've upgraded, after your cluster control plane is upgraded, KubeADM upgrade performs some post-upgrade kind of post-control plane upgrade tasks. And like, for example, I have a PR up for upgrading alpha bootstrap tokens to beta ones. There are like one minor change we have to do, just fixing a small bug there. But I mean, that would just delete the alpha static pod checkpointer there is kind of trivial. Or have it I mean, we could also have it there for 1.9, and then 1.10 we'll remove we have like double or something. I don't know, but anyway, I mean, I don't think that's at all a problem. And
so I have an alternative suggestion, which may be crazy, but I'll say it, which is that rather than bringing in an out-of-tree checkpointer, could we just give people early access to, I guess the checkpoint is in the kubelet, right? So we'd have to give people early access to a build of the kubelet from master, or I don't know, it's going to be ages until the 1.9 branch is cut, right? But no? Okay.
They cut the 1.9 branch like midstream of the 1.8 release typically. The alpha I don't know why they do it. I've actually been opposed to this because you get this weird crisscross of features that occurs, and I see Lucas smiling because he's had to do that, put it in the code, because I've seen it in the code. But there's this crisscross of features, so they'll cut the alpha version pretty early.
Well, so what if I can finish the thought, like if we can give people a way of like instructions of trying out a version of all the components that work together in the way that we actually wanted to design it, and give that to people sort of out of band with respect to the release cycle, but during the 1.9 release cycle, then we can achieve the goal which I have, which is get people testing this stuff the way that it's eventually going to be rolled out in 1.9 as early as possible, so that we can get eyeballs on it and testers.
Right. I mean, I guess to summarize, the pushback to Lucas's proposal is that we are both having people test in the wild, not in the way that we want them to run eventually, which is what Luke is saying, and also that we're creating technical debt, which is what Tim is saying, in terms of because they're running it differently, we then need to provide an upgrade scenario to get them back to the mainstream. And that adds extra code, extra complexity in the meantime, extra test burden in the meantime, and extra test burden during that upgrade scenario. So is there a way that we can sort of avoid the tech debt and get people to start running sort of the desired version of self-hosting soon, right? I guess that to summarize, right? You're muted, Luke.
Oh, I'm muted. Sorry. Yeah, so I was just going to say, like, I feel like some sort of like package of an early 1.9 alpha kubelet plus a version of that. We also need the daemon set upgrade, the daemon set rollout strategy. So once we have those two pieces in master, we can cut a binary or a set of binaries, a set of container images that we encourage people to test with. Can we not?
So the first 1.9 alpha release, like 1.9 alpha 1, should be cut, as Tim was saying, probably 2 weeks after we cut 1.8 or something like that. It's very early. And so if we sort of have the PRs lined up for daemon set upgrade strategy and kubelet self-hosting, we can try to get both those into that first 1.9 alpha release, and then cut a kubeadmin based on that and say, if you want to try out self-hosting, here's the release you use. And it's still alpha. It'd be sort of marked as alpha in the same way that we'd mark it as alpha today, but without the tech debt. So
Lucas, you seem a little, let's say, frustrated, maybe a bit strong, but like, what's the, what are your feelings on this?
I was thinking, yeah. I think it's, well, it might work, but I think it's worse than giving something to 1.8 users and having a really easy way. I'm not at all worried about the like upgrade case there, given how things are implemented. And also I mean, the most important thing is like the user doesn't care about how checkpointing is implemented. And I mean, I think the most important task
the users don't even care about self-hosting. They really only care about upgrades. At the end of the day, no operator cares that you're self-hosted or not. They care about clean upgrades.
Mostly.
I mean,
mostly, I would agree with you.
I mean, we're a small subset of the universe. Most operators, they just want it to work and upgrade.
Let's go back to goals. Let's talk about what our goals are. So, Lucas, what are your goals, and why? What are the goals that are pushing you to suggest this, like, Bootkube option?
So we could say to users that we have, like, advertise in blog posts that we have a new feature called self-hosting.
Mm-hmm.
You can try this out by setting the feature flag, and you don't have to do anything more. And it's convenient, and those users who are interested in what does a self-hosted cluster look like can also, like, tinker with it and just, I mean, when they're done, Cubed and reset. And I mean, all this works. The only thing that doesn't work is, like, if you reboot. And I mean, as it's alpha, it might even be fine to say, like, if you enable self-hosting in this version and reboot, your cluster is going to burn to the ground. I mean, that's even reasonable if we decide so. And compared to, like, providing users with a lot of custom build from master, what Alpha 1 basically is, which can be how, I mean, unstable. We don't know how unstable Alpha 1 is going to be, but pretty unstable, as it's just a scheduled cut from master. So I think it's more like handling expectations and saying, like, either we enable the Bootkube checkpointing, providing a more, like, nearly beta quality, like, feature-wise, self-hosting feature in 1.8, or we keep it really on an alpha level and say, this is what we're going to do in 1.9, but if you reboot your cluster, it's not going to work.
So if I can summarize what I think you just described as the goal, so your goal is to give users something that they can actually use off the official 1.8 release, so we don't let people down in terms of expectations that we've set. That's one aspect. And then also so that we can give people something that they can play with. Not necessarily use for real, but play with that isn't scary and alpha 1.9 alpha 1 and cut from master. Okay, so I think those are reasonable goals. I would suggest adding an additional goal, which is the goal, or at least discussing an additional goal, which is the goal that was behind my proposal, which was that I think so I think it's important that we get users testing self-hosting before we give it to them for real in 1.9.
Exactly.
But I think it's important that the version of self-hosting that they test is as close as possible to what we're actually going to ship, versus a different approach. Because if we give them a different approach, and then they test that, and we get some feedback based on that approach, we maybe find some bugs in Bootkube or whatever, or the way that we're using it, and then we end up shipping something completely different in 1.9, then we won't have learned anything about the different thing that we ship. And we will have wasted time and effort in trying to go down a different path. It's just the going down the different path bit that worries me. Does that make sense?
I think it's far better than having no checkpointer. Like, if those are the two, I don't definitely don't.
The checkpointer is kind of orthogonal, right? Like, all it does is bring up the control plane all it does is ensure that when the kubelet restarts, it brings up the control plane. That's pretty much it. So it's from a feature perspective, the only thing that we would need to deal with is the upgrade strategy to get them from A to B. And if Lucas is confident with that, I'm pretty okay with it. It is some level of debt, but it is again orthogonal to the main premise. But the question then becomes, because we have everything as alpha in our stated things, how many people use alpha grade things? How many people would be okay with using alpha grade things?
We don't know.
I turn on alpha features in Kubernetes when I use it.
Me too.
Hasn't bitten me yet, but then I don't run any particularly massive clusters. So
I don't know. Typically, people err on the side of caution for anything, actually running their production grade workloads.
What do others think?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, what are other people's positions or opinions on this this decision?
So if you do end up using the pod check pointer, it, like the external one, it ultimately is just a daemon set that will clean up everything as soon as you delete it. So it's not that big of a deal to switch from one to the other. It would just be delete a daemon set and then add whatever flag to the kubelet. So that I wouldn't be particularly worried about. It is different. Like I agree that we want to be testing native kubelet checkpointing at some point, because that's a meaningful thing that we need to rely on. But if you want to use it, it's not that big of a deal to get rid of it afterwards.
Yeah, and also, oh, Justin, sorry.
I was going to say, we should also be careful about turning on the market machine if it's only available in something which we don't really want people to use in production, because like we see in like the other projects that are like users then start asking for, why don't I have pod checkpointing, or why don't I have self-hosting in GKE, right? Oh, I'm not going to use GKE because I can't have pod checkpointing, and then or self-hosting or whatever it is, and it becomes tricky to explain to people that actually, this feature that was a big 1.8 feature is highly experimental and not available on GKE, or not available in COPS, or not available on OpenShift, or not available in Tectonic.
That's a really interesting point. So that's another goal that we haven't captured yet, which is kubeadmin clusters should represent vanilla Kubernetes as much as possible. Maybe. Is that a fair characterization?
They will.
Sorry, Justin, was that a fair characterization of what you said?
Yes, I think it's fair to do things that are in advance of, and prototype things and do things that are a little bit ahead of what everyone else is offering. But I think it has to be caveated a little bit so that people understand that it is early access or something like that.
I think, despite the name alpha, there's a lot of people who hear alpha with other features and think, well, Kubernetes alpha stuff is usually pretty good. And, so this stuff really is alpha. And so, it's yeah. So I agree with Justin. We got to be careful here.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting one, because after what Tim just said, I was erring more on the side of oh yeah, okay, fine, let's do it. But then Justin and Aaron's Justin's point anyway, and Justin and Joe sort of swung me back a little bit the other way. Not that it's my decision, it's our decision to make. So
I think we just need to make sure that it gets communicated with the right red flashing warnings. Like the whole sort of, if you get a power failure and your whole cluster goes down, it won't come back up automatically, right? Or, if we do that without the checkpoint, or if we do the checkpoint and we're like, hey, this is, there's a little bit of chewing gum and baling wire here, and this is not the eventual thing. The same thing happened with kubeadmin with the token stuff early on before it was actually done, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I for one think that if the outer tree checkpointer is indeed going to be fairly painless and easy to delete, then having it as an explicitly documented bodge because we failed to get the checkpointer into 1.8 as we were aiming to, which is absolutely fine to, it's okay to communicate that. There are good reasons for it. Like, we're not bad people. But I do think that having that explicitly documented bodge in place as a still get people trying this stuff, still get people trying self-hosted clusters and upgrades. If indeed it is truly transparent to the users, modulo the existence of a daemon set, then I could get behind it.
Yeah, I think so. And of course, like, we should still, of course, like as Robert said, get the strategy into all for one. We should get like checkpointing in as soon as possible in the 1.9 cycle. Enable it for Cube8M at master, run a lot of tests, like both automated and manual, and hopefully also get the like 1.9 alpha 3 users. Like, we should definitely document that as a whole. Like, how do you test out Cube8M? I mean, that's actually something I haven't thought about. Like, sprang to mind now with this discussion. I mean, we should document how to run any given alpha or beta release with Cube8M, of course, which we haven't done. So I mean, that's a good task practice anyway. So I think there were two proposals, and we could get away with both.
Yeah, I think doing both seems plausible, as long as the people who actually have to write the code don't feel like it's too much work. I think Lucas is volunteering to write the code because he made the proposal.
Well, I mean, the code is written by Chorus already, so.
Right, yeah.
Easy.
Yay! Okay. Okay, so this sounds like a plausible direction. Any objections? Does anyone feel like we shouldn't go down that route?
And indeed, I mean, happy to take reviews, suggestions from Justin, Joe, etc. when we finally do the doc PR.
Yeah, the communication on this is going to be the most important bit. Like, we didn't get this in because of this PR link. This means that we're doing this other workaround to get you this feature in a pre-alpha state, really. It's like really more alpha than Kubernetes alpha.
I don't think so. I mean, the only thing that's alpha is the checkpointer, and as far as I know, it's used in production with Tectonic. Is that right? Yeah. So I mean, I don't think it's that bad, actually. So
the problem is we need to get people testing upgrades with these strategies in place like now. I have it for a later agenda item, but the whole state of the one thing we had as P0 item for this release cycle outside of features was to solidify the testing infrastructure and test. I don't see what's his name on. Jacob, yeah. To solidify the testing infrastructure and the set of tests to validate some of these features that are going in, and to make sure we have automation in place to make sure that we have coverage, because 1.7 went out. So 1.7 went out, and like a lot of issues cropped up, and a lot of the time that we spent in 1.8, in the beginning of the cycle, was spent to bug fixes, patches to 1.7. Where if we do some of the work now, we can hedge off against this, right?
I can take. Oh, Robert.
You go ahead. All I was going to say is Jessica joined the call, and the first agenda item that she'd put on the list was talking about designs for automated upgrade testing. So I've been investing in trying to get the new upgrade command tested in CI. Yeah.
So, I mean, the bugs we found in one of one of them could have been avoided with even better tests, like automated ones, but most of them were like environment kind of specific. I mean, there's always going to be cases that we aren't able to test. So what I am and Justin have been looking into here in the recent days is federated testing, and myself, I've been thinking about like federated testing for kubeadm. We shouldn't. I mean, there's a way to upload test results from any given machine to the test grid, right? So, I mean, that's what we should do for all the different environments we have. And I'm myself and Justin is trying to figure out the spec, as the design docs there are really outdated. So it's a non-obvious API there, but as we get that nailed down, I mean, it's one script away or something to actually having it really easy to run like a bash for loop or whatever, to just kubeadm init with your desired configuration on your desired machine. Then it will run the tests in cluster, kind of what Sonoboy does, and then just upload to GCS bucket. And that's all. Then like fetch the next build. So, I mean, I have that kind of running in 100 lines of bash or something. and it's pretty straightforward. I mean, spinning up a kubeadm cluster is like 3 lines of code. So that's one of the things we should get done and documented. Regarding like the overall test goal of 1.8, I think we're in pretty good shape. We've added the coverage for bootstrap tokens and the node authorizer. As Robert said, we have Jessica working on the upgrade EDUs for the upgrade scenario, and such things. Also now we're testing CI, like latest master in the CI. Before that, we targeted the control plane images at the latest released version of Kubernetes, like Alpha 3 or whatever. Now we test it really at master, which is an improvement. So I think we're progressed quite nicely there, but of course we can't do too much testing.
Indeed. So shall we move on to the agenda for today?
Yeah, we only have 17 minutes left, so let's try to get through the next couple of items pretty quick. They're all PRs from Luke, it looks like.
Yeah, they're really just quick PSAs. I have a bug fix for upgrading bootstrap tokens, as said. I've updated the SIG-cluster-lifecycle release notes, the ones I could spot, and I'm currently writing up task items, quarterly task items of kubeadm. Like what have I done like in the latest 3 months? I'm basically writing that down and providing a release doc, so it's obvious to others like how do we do things with kubeadm, and like when do we do like some tasks. And it generally just follows the normal Kubernetes release schedule, like when is the time to do feature issues, when is the time to code, when is the time to stabilize or clean up or whatever. And just writing that down as a post-mortem item from 1.6. I'm taking a stab at that now. Then we have, Jessica.
Yeah, so I have a proposal out on how to do cluster upgrades with Kubernetes Anywhere, and that will be the fuel that drives our end-to-end kubeadmin upgrade tests. So please take a look if you're interested or have any ideas in that area. Thanks.
Very cool. Thank you.
How, quick question, like how near this go live, like in days or weeks to actually have in the test grid?
That is a good question. I'm doing coding now. It's not in days, but hopefully not too many weeks. I'm uncertain. That's the better answer.
Does anyone know off the top of their head what the release date for 1.8 is? It's probably about a month from now, right?
7th?
Yes.
27th September?
Yep.
So if we don't have the automated upgrade testing in time for that, we will definitely have to plan to do manual upgrade testing.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so of course. Well, I'll see how far I can go with my bash script, and see if I can borrow some machines from Packet or whatever to do some automated testing with upgrades. I mean, just kubeadm init 1.7, kubeadm upgrade 1.8, and then run edu tests. That's kind of straightforward right now.
Out of interest, what do we actually test in terms of, like, do we just test that an upgraded cluster works, or do we try to bring things across and test it, or do we try to like upgrade during an EDE run?
So for the work that I'm doing, the idea is that we will do an upgrade and we'll actually test during the upgrade as well, in addition to the end state that things are functional. The details are in the kubeadmin upgrade test plan, so feel free to look at that.
I will read it. Consider me told.
Yeah, so right now, Justin, we have sort of both of those sets of tests, and the verify that a cluster works after upgrade tests are basically SKU tests, right? They're not really upgrade tests. And I need to go talk to the release team about maybe renaming those for this release, because it would be great to call those what they are, which is SKU tests. And then the new upgrade test framework that Chris wrote, I think 1 or 2 releases ago, are the actual upgrade tests, where we create objects, we do an upgrade, we verify that they are working before, during, and after the upgrade. So we have both those sets of tests now. The ones that are sort of actual upgrade tests test many fewer parts of the cluster than the SKU tests do. But when we picked the set of tests to implement for those upgrade tests, we thought they covered a pretty good sort of cross-section of functionality. Not everything, though.
So just to clarify, like we do kubeadm init, we run normal edu tests right away, or do we upgrade directly?
I don't quite understand that question. Are you talking about existing behavior or the intended stuff we're going to implement, or?
So the proposal, is it to do kubeadm init, edu test, kubeadm upgrade, edu test, or is it kubeadm init, upgrade, edu test?
I'm sorry, I don't quite follow. What's the difference between those two?
So do we edu test in between, like creating the initial cluster and the upgraded cluster, and do whatever, like take the difference between those or something?
I thought it was supposed to be control plane. I thought you were supposed to do edu test. You're supposed to do control plane upgrade, test the verification, then test the entire update state as well. So those 3, I mean, Robert would know the best. Is he still on?
Yeah, so I think what I'm reading from Jessica's proposal is that we'll basically use Chris's test framework, where we actually test objects across upgrades, but we will drive the upgrades through Kubernetes Anywhere instead of through cube up. Is that correct, Jessica?
Yes.
So that would be sort of the new set of upgrade tests I was referring to, which is the, like creates a deployment, verify it works, start an upgrade, verify it's still working, finish an upgrade, verify it's still working. So we're actually verifying the continuity of that object across the upgrades, as opposed to run EDE tests, delete all of your objects, then do an upgrade, then run new EDE tests, which verifies that the cluster is it's in a new functional state, but doesn't verify that the upgrade didn't break anything. So in the fullness of time, we like both. We want the sort of skew testings where you take an upgrade, you take a cluster, upgrade it, verify it still works, but we also need the tests where you verify things work during the upgrade.
Okay, yeah. So we're gonna, do we want to do both, like both skew and upgrade tests in the coming days, weeks? Or can we like focus on just getting the skew tests first, which mean that we cover, what we basically then cover is, does kubeadm upgrade apply, do the right thing, and then focus on like the actual upgrade tests. Does my deployment still work after upgrade? That's more like Kubernetes specific, like are SIG-apps, have SIG-apps done the right thing, right? And that's already covered by KubeUp.
I mean,
right
so
now.
it's sort of covered by KubeUp. It's covered, but the signal is pretty terrible, right? Like, nobody's really looking at those tests. They're failing a lot of the time. It's been one of the last things we've gotten a signal from for the last 2 releases. So if we could get a better signal for that, that would actually be really helpful. But I think Jessica's plan is to implement the upgrade mechanics, and then we can figure out like which set of tests we run and in what order once we have the mechanics in place. So if people think it's more important to create a cluster, upgrade a cluster, run EDEs, which will sort of match our existing set of tests, except with the upgrade step in the middle, I think that would be pretty easy to configure in the test info repo.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think we should enable or add the coverage for kubeadm upgrade, right? Then we can improve as we go, right? Just
Yeah,
so
let
we
me
have
read
coverage on kubeadm
one
upgrade.
paragraph on the test plan. It says, we'd spin up a 1.6 cluster, upgrade to 1.7 while running upgrade tests, and then run conformance tests after the upgrade is done. So I think that pretty much covers what we want.
Yeah, that's Q, right? In this terminology.
No, it's test during the upgrade, and then when everything's upgraded, we test. So that verifies the cluster is still working. When it started in an old version, it got upgraded. Skew is where you have your master and your nodes at different versions.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So this would not test skew yet. Like we can figure that out separately, but this would test during an upgrade, we don't break things, and after an upgrade, the cluster is conformant.
Yeah. We already have kind of skew tests that are kubeadm specific, where we do, like on the 1.7 branch, for example, we set Kubernetes version to 1.6 and use kubeadmin to deploy a 1.6 cluster test. All conformance tests are working. That's the kubeadm version of skew tests of the kubeadm CLI binary.
Right. I would also eventually like to move our sort of skew tests where the master nodes are different versions onto kubeadmin also and get them off kubeadmin. But that's separate from what Jessica's doing.
Cool. So I think the only other item on the agenda, unless it's changed since I last looked at it, was state of tests ? Which I think is what we were just discussing.
Yep, that was exactly what I wanted to cover, so I could probably just remove that.
Cool. Anything else anyone wants to talk about in the next 5 minutes that's not on the agenda?
I will mention, if you go to the SIG cluster lifecycle dashboard, other than the 2 suites that are called flaky, which are flaky, everything else has nice green check marks, which means that they are mostly passing. So the kubeadmin tests are looking really green, which is nice.
Yay, that's good. Excellent.
Yeah, and one thing a known issue right now is kubeadm join of 1.8 can't be used on a node where you have kubelet 1.7, a kubelet 1.7 manifest, the way it's currently implemented. And I mean, we definitely have time to fix this yet. This is due to in 1.7 we did the TLS bootstrapping and like fetched the first CSR, waited for it, and like went with that, wrote it to kubelet conf, etc Kubernetes kubelet conf. In 1.8, as we should, Mike removed that duplication of code, and now kubeadm is just writing to etc Kubernetes bootstrap kubelet.conf, which means that a 1.7 kubelet won't recognize that new file we're writing at all. So should we like on kubeadm join exec out kubelet version and check which version we have and do the TLS bootstrapping if 1.7, or like skip it and delegate that to the kubelet if 1.8, or do we have any opinions here?
I mean, you just mentioned the fact that we do skew testing between 1.7 and 1.6. I think we need the same skew testing between 1.8 and 1.7, where kubeadmin in 1.8 can launch a 1.7 cluster, which presumably means launching a 1.7 kubelet, which means writing the kubelet config file that a 1.7 kubelet will read.
Yeah.
So as long as that works.
But that doesn't work right now.
Yeah, we should fix that. That's what I'm saying. We need to make that work.
Does Mike have some cycles to like, we basically have to revert his PR?
Mike is out at least this week, and maybe part of next week he's on a vacation. So I would say probably not right now. I will mention we have another person at Google who had started looking into how to configure skew testing using Kubernetes Anywhere last week also. He's also on vacation this week, so we won't see much progress there. But if nobody picks that up when he's back next week, we'll keep pushing on skew testing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we just have to be aware of it.
Can we do like a partial revert of the PR where we just revert the changes to the kubeadmin part and then we can flag guard them based on the Kubernetes?
The PR included only changes for kubeadmin itself. So
sounds like we should just pull it back.
Yeah. But other than that, I'm gonna update the upgrades doc to reflect the state we agreed on. Just fix some grammar nits and maybe reorganize the doc to look a little bit nicer, so we can merge it sometime in the coming future.
Cool. Okay. Well, I just wanted to say thank you, Lucas, for figuring out a workaround so that we can still get something self-hosting-like into this release. I think that's pretty smart. Again, if anyone doesn't feel comfortable with it, speak up now or mention it on Slack or...
Okay, we have 45 seconds. So the summary is we are okay calling it alpha, right? Because in the release notes right now, self-hosting is labeled as alpha. So if we don't want to label as alpha, we need to have Lucas's PR get updated to change that.
I think we want to call it alpha due to, of course, it would have been nice to call it beta, but the two requirements didn't make it. So I think it's very fair to call it alpha.
Can we say something like experimental or pre-alpha? Do those exist?
We can use any words we like, surely.
I feel like until it's end-to-end tested with everything, because even though the pod check pointer works, for example, for the boot kube use case, it's like until it's implemented in kubeadmin, I feel weird about telling people, yeah, this is like an alpha feature. I don't know.
Let's call it experimental.
I mean, alpha does mean you can't rely on this behavior. It's going to change, and do not use it in production. I think that's the part of the contract with alpha. But generally,
it's kind
I
of.
think in the user-facing documentation, it never hurts to be more explicit.
Yeah.
Like make sure this is actually alpha, right? Like some things that are alpha are like kind of usable, but this is. Like,
I think this is usable still, but yeah, I agree with you.
Sorry, I mean kind of usable in production. Like there are people that are willing to take the risk of an alpha feature in production because it works, and they know that there's going to be some pain around upgrades. And they're like, if we think master reboot might destroy your cluster or something like that, that's a little bit more of a risk than like upgrades of your cron jobs will lose your cron jobs, right? But the rest of your cluster will work.
Well,
so
the
risk is just higher when it's the control plane itself.
Yeah, I would encourage us to label this experimental, although to be clear, the goal with adding this out of tree checkpointer would be that things do work with upgrades, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, the goal is that they work, right?
Sorry, do work with reboots, I mean.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, both. So yeah, we can say like, here's how you can test it out. It's definitely going to change the like nitty-gritty implementation, but it's cool, and you can get a sense of what it's going to look like in 1.9.
And the user experience isn't going to change.
The user experience, no, the user experience is not going to change.
Exactly.
That's the low-level details of how we do things.
Yes.
And one last thing is like, I think we can mark the implementation of kubeadm init beta in 1.8. That's because now we have why we didn't do it before. We said that the UX is stable and it's not going to change. But now we can also say the implementation is stable or beta level as we have bootstrap tokens and these things backed out.
Cool. Okay, great. We're over time, so out of respect for everyone's time, let's knock it on the head. Thank you, everyone, and see you either in our various later meetings this week or this time next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Luke.